Hello, and welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Network podcast, where everyone belongs, especially if you think you don't. My name is Chris Grundeman, and I'm here with our absolutely amazing, if a little bit stuffed up, co-host, Zoe Rose.
It's better than stuck up, I guess.
This is the Nico Strina episode, and I think you're going to love it. Nico is Vice President, Network, Software, and Platform Architecture at a little data center company called Equinix. He's held previous technical leadership roles at Twilio, Twitch, Jaguar Network, and many more. He's also done 2 tours as an executive board member at France IX and is generally a big deal in the internet and interconnection space. Hey, Nico, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself a bit further to the Imposter Syndrome Network?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and hello, everyone. Nice to be here today, and thank you for hosting me. To give you a bit of context about myself, so I grew up in France a long time ago, where I started my career as a network engineer / business owner. Where I started my first company back in '98. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but became more focused on the networking for 15 years plus on broadband and network access, FTTH, and related. And then the end of 2015, I decided to move to more content related companies because I had the impression that I knew very well the access part. I wanted to see a bit the delivery side of the house, which was very exciting. So that was for Twitch and Twilio. And more recently, about a year and a half ago, I joined Equinix as part of the OCTO, the Office of the CTO, focusing on network and network software. And more recently, I took the role of vice president to drive the network software and platform architecture. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for being here. So just diving in here, as we sometimes do, I'd like to start back at the very beginning of your career, maybe even pre-career. So I know you grew up in France, as you just said. I'm assuming your first job maybe wasn't in technology. What was your actual very first job?
That's a really good question. So I graduated as a car mechanic because back in the days, my family was into cars and stuff like that. And it started with my granddad, and then my dad, my uncles, my family was kind of working all together. So that was kind of the go-to thing, if I can say. But that was early 90s, mid 90s, and then I'm doing music. I'm also a musician and doing electronic music. And by doing that, I discovered Linux and then started digging into, systems and, I need to do some NAT. So let's do some NAT. And then what became something fun became a passion. And then this is where I kind of went back to school for a while, which I gave up because I was so involved into the internet. If you want, I was already my head was focusing on how to build servers and infrastructure, generally speaking. So that's how things started. And then from there, as I said, started my first company and ongoing. So very different job.
I think that's the first person that said they got into tech because of music. Not the first that liked to do tech because of music, to pay for the music. But I think you're the first that's...
So the reason behind is you need to use, we were using sync or MIDI as protocols to synchronize equipments. And somehow having MIDI channels or devices on the network is not far off.
Fair.
And when I needed to have multiple servers to kind of protect my infrastructure because I had multiple devices behind, everything kind of makes sense. I don't know to explain.
No, that makes 100% sense. The only thing that doesn't make sense is music and Linux, because Linux traditionally doesn't have the great experience with that.
So that's actually it does. Back then, the MIDI software I was using was Cubase, and it's expensive, right? So back then, you still you started seeing sequencers that were capable of running under Linux. It was a bit difficult depending what MIDI interface you were picking up, but there was some free solution. It never went very far, and I didn't do much with it at the end, and it became fast my NAT device, but and then MIDI and everything else remained on Windows for years until I moved to Mac. So
that's very cool. Yeah, it makes sense to me. I kind of almost did the opposite. I got into music for a little while around some of the synthesizers and MIDI stuff, almost because of technology. I mean, I obviously listened to music a lot, but then got into playing with it a little bit more with like the MIDI controllers and synthesizers, and as that stuff got digitized a little bit later on. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's much easier today for sure. Like everything else is over USB, so
yeah,
like it's making your life much easier.
Yeah, much easier for sure. And actually, we also share. I mean, so not quite as deep. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a diesel mechanic, and so I've since inherited his tools. So I've got some really giant wrenches and stuff in my garage, which is kind of cool. That every now and then I get to pull one out and actually use it, but most of it's too big for the cars and stuff I work on these days.
Yeah, this is the part of my life that's totally. Like I had to put so much involvement into like the technicals to be able to ramp up, right? The first Cisco device that I touched I was trading it against like an old UPS that I was no longer using. So like, like an exchange, and I have that device in my hands and I'm like, okay, what to do with that? Like Ethernet ports and like all the AUE adapters and everything else. Like, I mean, that was another era, but that's how like things started.
That's really interesting. I like those kind of stories. Like, okay, I've got this. What do I do with it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So as Chris mentioned, you've had quite a vast career and you've had quite senior positions. Obviously, you probably started somewhere. But I'm curious based on what you said about being quite hands-on, learning as you're going, to now being in a much more senior position. What do you like about being in that much more manager leader position that you wouldn't have as maybe an individual contributor?
The possibility to just push through things and to help people like that are pushing through that particular thing. Like I think that the role for like leaders, it should be just to make sure that we enable our folks to be able to just go and do things. And this is why, like for me, that's something else that depending where you are, you don't have that chance of having like as an IC the voice being heard. And this is the part where, like in my view, like that's the opposite. Is like we can define the North Star as like leaders, but like how to get to the North Star, and I can like define the milestones and everything else. I think that's the role of ICs, and this is where like that's where I see we should empower our people. That's the bottom line is like giving them the motivation and the way to go. Like if you can have the full scope and push to execution, often you can see like you define something else and it's hard. There is all these cross-functional discussions that needs to happen. I think that's empowering. I like it. That's one of my favorite words actually. So.
I had another question kind of on the same strand. One of our previous guests mentioned the challenge of being promoted or going to a much more senior position too quickly. So I was curious on what your thoughts were about if somebody was in a more junior position and they were wanting to go to that much more senior role. What are things that you think that they should prioritize building skills on?
That's a good question. I think that so like having the foundations, I like what you said, like there is things that are fundamental. One of them is like problem solving. I think that people needs to be able to foresee and overlook at like organizations with like different problems and kind of sticking up the dots together, like to try to like solve like issues. That's one of the things. The second point, and the second skill I think that is very important is the ability to manage up. And what I mean by managing up is the ability to communicate, report, and show like the what the organization like is doing somewhere, like in the performance like related to that, being efficient and being able to understand how your shop is running. I think it's fundamental in my opinion. And the third, I would say that's probably like being able to explain something else in an easy way to folks that like probably don't have the context and don't have maybe the understanding of like what the subject is about. So you need to be able to have that. And of course, like I think building a cross-functional relationship and building trust is very important as well. Because if you want to be able to succeed in a large corporation, like generally speaking, I mean, there's many groups that can be scattered in different organizations. That's one of the most difficult thing to do. So working with influence for the goal to execute the North Star of the company.
That's one thing I've used to my advantage, though, when it comes to cold sales calls, is they'll call me and I'll be like, I don't have buying power. Or I'll be like, I think somebody else in the company deals with that. It's not my department. And then they'll be like, oh, can I have their email? And I'll be like, I don't know who deals with it.
That's right. Like, like this, I mean, in that context, okay, like that's why empowering again is important. Giving self-confidence to people, it's fundamental. Because all these skills require like a certain point to be able to express your ideas or like put it on paper. Like I always say, write it down. Like it's important to put your ideas on paper to be able to just like spread it and spread your ideas out. So.
Yeah, well, that point you made about confidence is really key, because making those quick decisions in times where you don't have the luxury of time, you have to have the confidence to back it up, and the knowledge of not just the technical side, but also the business as to what makes sense. No, I really like that. Really good answer.
Yes. Putting data like in front of you to decide, I think it still remains the way, the one of the best way. It's important to know and understand like the key KPIs or metrics that are going to help you potentially to take some of the decisions. So yes, it's a mix a bit of everything else, but I think that those skills are probably the most important.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. It's a really good list. I like it, of kind of things to build up before you get into leadership or as you're kind of developing as a leader. Is there anything you miss about being an individual contributor?
Yes, there is. I mean, like managing, it's a lot of back and forth and like escalations and different things. I think I miss the moments where you can be totally hands-on and like lock yourself up into like a lab or something like that, where you focus on some tasks and then you go for it. I think that's kind of what I miss, but somehow like it's also like very demanding also as well. So all in all, I think that like being hands-on, yes, like is probably like something else I would miss the most.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been as a consultant recently. I've been bouncing around and kind of doing multiple things, and recently got back into like doing some actual like coding and putting together some automation. I had almost kind of forgotten the joy of doing something like that, where you can kind of sit by yourself in a room, crank the music up or whatever, and kind of bang through something. And the thing that struck me as I was kind of now, getting that emotional boost of completing something like that I hadn't had in quite a while, was just the fact that it's so concrete, right? If I write a program and it works, then I don't need anyone else's validation for that. Like, no one needs to tell me it worked. No one needs to smile or nod. Like, I built it, I ran it, it works. I feel good, right? Whereas so much of leadership and just so much of the work I've done in the last 10 years even around kind of marketing and sales and these kind of other business development things is so tied to other people. And you've got this kind of soft, understanding of, am I really doing well? It's hard to tell. I don't know. Like, he kind of smiled, she kind of nodded at me. Maybe she's hearing what I'm saying. I don't, as a communicator, it's very different. Whereas, just sitting down and doing the thing, there's just a different satisfaction that comes from it. I find.
I agree with you. Like, and that's the part where that's what I try to convey in my management style, is like being able to keep the execution path like active. Like, it's very difficult. Like, when you depend on someone else, I mean, you have to wait. There is sprints, there is whatever. Like, this is why like the hands-on, like I like that part, because this is where you can potentially make a huge difference. Or go to implement something else that is going to be meaningful and make a good impact. I mean, that's for sure. Like, it's like I can understand the content that you have at the end of the oh, cool. That's the way. Like, I think we, again, to go back to leadership, like making sure that we enable folks, and I like a part of the things that I'm doing today, or like in my job, like there is a long path of execution, and sometimes it's good to be able to have the control over it, and then being able to push forward. I think it's like trying to reach the North Star.
Yeah, I was explaining to one of my coworkers today about the difference between accountability versus responsibility, and how when you're the individual contributor, you may be responsible for completing a task, but if you're the manager, you're accountable. So if they don't do it well, you have to do it, and how sometimes that's not the best thing in the world. But yeah, no, it's definitely very different perspectives, and also figuring out how much of something needs to be done and to what quality, which is something I didn't realize that I, like, without thinking about it, I didn't realize, oh yeah, no, I have to be accountable, and like realize how in depth that task needs to be done. Whereas as a contributor, you just do what you're told, So it's interesting. It's definitely different.
After, it depends on the level. I would say for the ACs, like for like early career, yes, you can take like let's say task that will be coming your way. Like as you're growing up, I would imagine that's one of the things I would say to the folks is being able to take initiative and can bring the difference to your leadership. One is here to enable and make sure that you have everything else you need. And this is why managing up is important no matter what, because you people taking initiative, that's what makes difference, right? At the end. So I really appreciate what you just said.
So, wow, this is a very bad segue because completely different conversation. I'm interested in your experience of moving countries because we've had chats with a couple of other people previously, and myself, I've also moved countries a few times. But I'm curious from your perspective, moving from France to, I believe, Switzerland to then San Francisco, what were your kind of experiences with that and maybe thoughts of things that you really enjoyed about moving country and changes in types of jobs or roles to what you didn't enjoy as much?
So moving, so I did move back and forth between different countries. So I'm going to pass on that. But the thing that I really enjoy was kind of each time it's kind of a new start somehow. You're even if you don't change role particularly, but somehow it's I don't know, being on a mission, you're moving to something else to do, especially when you move for work, which is my case. If I take the example of when I moved from France to San Francisco the last time for Twitch, for instance, clearly I had the mission attached to that. I knew what I was supposed to execute. So if you want, that was super exciting. I was finally being able to sit in the same office as my coworkers because, before I was that guy in Europe that's doing some stuff and communication was kind of super tricky. So moving has been fantastic, meeting new people, adapting to the local life was not that difficult at the end of the day because I was doing so much back and forth to go Nanog and everything else like that. If you want, it was kind of the end of the journey somehow. I was arriving to a certain destination and to do something else. So very positive, very, very positive. Being able to be close to decision makers, meeting new people, open different doors, and it gave me multiple opportunities. So that I think I will never forget that part. Now, when it comes to things that were difficult, was to live far from family. I think that's the thing. I have kids, and they live in Europe, so it's kind of tricky sometimes, especially when you have stuff like COVID kicking in, and you are limited to fly, and so that was kind of a pain. But overall, everything else remains very, very positive because today, I established my way of living and going back and forth with Europe and being able to split a bit my time between both continents. So I would say that I'm kind of benefiting from the flexibility of our jobs where we can be working and and moving pretty easily. So that's kind of my takeaway of immigrating somewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And it kind of resonates. The same thing, when I moved from Colorado to the East Coast, I mean, definitely not quite the same because it's the same country at least, but still from, the mountains in the middle of America to the East Coast in New York City is maybe as big of a culture difference as there is between countries. Maybe. The biggest thing was same thing, right? Being that far from family and having, you can't just jump in your car and drive to see mom and dad or the kids or something like that, right? You've got to plan a whole thing around it, and it's a big deal.
That's right. And the thing that I'm trying to go at least once a quarter to know, even if it's a few days, it's always nice to see your parents or anything else like that. But then after, you make your life locally. I have a bunch of friends here now, after 7 years, living in USA. And that's it's just the new life. I like that feeling somehow, to discover new things because I'm not the youngest doing that. And it's kind of cool to discover each time I'm moving somewhere in the US, discovering new states and things like that. So again, it's very positive. And then family wise, after you can always fly them. And my kids are coming often. I just had my 2 daughters living a few weeks ago. And so it's things are doing good overall.
Awesome. That's great. And we do live in a pretty cool age where, I mean, it's not quite the same as being in person, but I don't know about you, but I do pretty regular Zoom calls with my kids, and that definitely helps kind of bridge the gap. At least, it's, like I said, it's not the same as being in person, but it's better than writing a letter and sending it on a ship or something as people had to do, a few years ago.
Definitely, I see it with my parents. I see it with my friends. I mean, I'm still very, very close with my hometown friends because the fun part is that before moving to USA, I mean, I grew up and lived in the same place for for as far as I remember. So if you want, that's kind of making the jump is it can be challenging, but like if you have motivation, like you can achieve lots of different things.
The other benefit that I've had is I forget what year I did something, but I think, okay, what country was I living in when that happened? So it has to have happened in this time frame. That's how I mark COVID, because I lived in Ireland at the time. So for me, I do have a distinction where most people are like, no, it was a bunch of years squished together.
Yeah, COVID's been very difficult. One of my kids is like more than 18 years old, so she could not fly in the US, so that was kind of difficult to catch up with her, like physically at least. But as you said, Chris, like Zoom, I mean, WhatsApp, Signal, like whatever you name it, there is a bunch of very good applications that helps you stay close. Like I see for my parents, that's how we communicate, and I speak to them like on a bi-weekly basis, I guess.
Nice.
Maybe less sometimes.
Yeah, very cool. Well, so it sounds like, moving was mostly positive and not really a challenge. I wonder, what has been the biggest challenge that you've had to face in your career so far?
I would say credibility is very important, because credibility brings trust, and then trust brings like collaboration, etc., etc. I think it's important to be reliable and show like doing the right thing. When you coming from Europe and being in the position I was in, I mean, I'm glad I had very good leadership at that time when I was at Twitch. So you will recognize him if you listen to the podcast. But it was like, building credibility and people to say like, okay, I trust you. Like I come out of nowhere. Like I was in Europe and some folks didn't know me. So if you want like coming and jumping in headquarters, you're meeting new people. And this is I think I had to prove myself to be able to deliver. And it was great. I mean, my coworkers were awesome in that regard. So
yeah, that makes sense. And like you said, it kind of ties back into the moving part, right? Where you're, before you were maybe just a name in Slack or whatever chat, was being used before, and actually sitting next to people and doing that definitely makes it come a little faster and easier, right?
Definitely. And that goes back to like building a relationship, like do what you say what you do, that type of approach. Like I think it's like being in service too, like working with others and things like that. That's what like somehow helps building that credibility. So if you want, I put in that bucket like lots of like many underlying things that needs to happen to be able to build that. But which was a great like a test and a great challenge. I mean, it was not easy to do that every day, because like my accent is pretty thick. So like it was very difficult at the beginning. It's getting better, but it's not very much better. But this part was like a barrier that I had to manage to push on the side of the road to be able to succeed at some point. So yeah, interesting period of my life.
Yeah, I work currently with a variety of people across Europe because I work within EMEA. I'm in the Netherlands. You probably can't tell, but I'm in the Netherlands. And I have noticed there are certain countries that people struggle a little bit communicating with other areas. France is one of them because, I mean, I grew up in Canada, so I'm used to different French, but still French accents. So I can understand it, but I have noticed other people struggle a little bit more understanding the accent. And so that does actually impact. It does impact the communication when you're not in person, for sure.
Totally. If it's like I agree with that. Now, for every I'm a very positive person, so I'm always looking at the bright side of the situation. So I see also tons of benefits being an accent, which is people are genuinely interested in others. Like I see that often where they are more likely to engage with me because like, hey, like what's that accent coming from? And when you're doing business, like, and when I was like particularly like doing more like biz dev related type of jobs, it was very helpful to establish contact and get people to listen to you because they have to pay attention to what you say. And at the end of the day, it's very helpful to carry on some messages. That's communication being key. I think that as long as the message is delivered, the transport method can be what else?
That's a fair point. It's like an icebreaker. Yeah.
And also, I like that idea of like forcing them to pay attention. I think I read something somewhere about, somebody who, whenever they were saying something important, they would actually like lower their tone of voice. Like they would start talking really softly, which kind of forces everyone to have to lean in and listen more intently, which seems counterintuitive, right? Because you would think if you want to get a message across, you need to be loud and like force it on people. But getting them to come in and have to dig for it, it can be helpful there. So that's interesting.
I do that when I'm angry.
Start talking quieter. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good anger technique. It's better than yelling for sure.
100%.
But another thing you said there, which we've obviously all seen, I think, through this conversation, is the fact that you're kind of always looking at the bright side of things, and that's something that I definitely at least try to do. I don't know that I always accomplish it, but really, focus on being positive, and it's been a big thing in my life. I think, everything from kind of how you talk to yourself to how you talk to others to just how you see things that are happening around you. I wonder is that something that just comes really naturally to you, or do you work at that? And either way, are there ways that, techniques you use to stay positive or to see the bright side or to see those silver linings? Because it's not always easy, I think, at least for me.
No, it's like definitely that's what I'm trying to do. It doesn't mean that I am all the time. There is days where you wake up and that day that starts where everything goes to hell. I think that it happens to everyone. I'm not sure. I think it's a mechanism that I acquired by telling myself that things will be all right. Sometimes when you're stressing out and I used to do lots of self-defense and there is one thing that kicks in is adrenaline. And when adrenaline kicks in, you freeze. And when you freeze, you lose kind of control of yourself, right? To a certain extent. It's the same when things goes bad, stepping back, being able to breathe and just tell yourself that everything's okay. There is a solution for every problems. And sometimes the solution can be harsh and it's going to be painful, but sometimes that's just a low-hanging fruit. And in fact, stressing out over low-hanging fruit, sometimes it's just a matter of stepping back and breathing, right? So I do that often, where I take a break and I go just go take a walk 5 minutes just to put your thoughts together. Stepping back from the situation can be very helpful. So if you want, that's kind of small methods like that that I acquired. And one of the things that is very important is taking feedback. We all, at a certain point, do something else that someone else won't like. And that's factual, right? I mean, you're crossing the road, when it's not your turn, whatever you can imagine. I think this is very important to be self-conscious about your own limits, because if you know yourself, it's easier to go and go and try to go against problem and then keep positivism. So building up that self-strength and we all fail at some point too. Accepting failure is also something else that we need to accept at some point. Find solutions, and that's what motivates me to be positive. Is finding solution, building something else in return that can be useful. I think that's how I keep my positivism. But there is days where it's going to take me a few minutes before I can get to the point where I can take to that moment where I'm okay, you understand what the problem is, and then you can move forward. And I think it's just a stance even when it's difficult.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I think making it a habit has helped, right? The more often you do it, the more it becomes kind of a reflex, I think. And definitely just the kind of seeing things as a challenge, as a test almost, right? I think that's one of the things that's helped me is, I think what I see is people who I tend to think of as more negative and more kind of pessimistic often see things as happening to them. The kind of, well, why is this happening to me? This always happens to me. Those kind of thoughts and feelings. And the way I've tried to combat that is just to look at it and say, this is a test. It's up to me to prove that I can overcome this, whatever it is, right? Just a personal test for me, which has worked pretty well for me, and making that a habit of just as you said, right? There is going to be a solution here. It's just up to me to figure it out.
Exactly. For me, I had a similar mantra to that somehow. But it goes along, and I really it resonates what you're saying, because there is no one of the coach that I had a while back was telling me anyway, you're the only person that can change the situation, right? I mean, when you're stepping in the mud and it's complicated and everything else, you're the one that can lift your legs and can start moving in one direction or another. What is making people doubt and me included, don't get me wrong, is the unknown, right? I mean, when you step somewhere else and you need to take decisions, I mean, sometimes it can have consequences, and it's important to think that anyway, no matter what you do, there will be consequences, positive or negative. If you come with a positive thoughts, positive mind, positive attitude, and everything else like that, I mean, it's important that you're doing your best. And doing your best can mean a variety of things for different people. And that's important to build that self-confidence, because often, when you do entrepreneurship and start companies and everything else like that, I mean, you fail, you stumble, there is tons of things. And that's why it's important to see the positive side. We can take action. You can take action as individual. And that's what makes like honestly, it took me time to be able to put this in motion, but when it comes to work, it's very efficient. I can relate on different topics on that.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the point you made about seeing it as a challenge as well, because I think for me, it's not that I think, oh, why does this happen to me? I usually have the opposite where I'm like, might have the lack of confidence is, oh, why did I cause this to happen? So when I change my mindset and say, actually, this is something I can get over, that has helped me actually build my confidence a little bit. I did have one question about, because we talked a lot about the kind of the more soft skills kind of a career and your career journey. But we didn't talk at that much about what you actually do. So I'm curious, what do you actually do right now, and what would your day-to-day kind of look like?
Right now, but it's the planning phase for us. So like we are working on our planning for next year. I mean, like probably like many companies, we are trying to put things together. So since I just took the role, also I'm focusing a lot on like bringing some health and healthy things giving some love to the organization, meaning understanding like clearly like all the things that we are doing in details, making sure that we have like clear definition of roadmaps and like communicating that to the broader audience. And taking care of, when I said the org, it's making sure that we have the right skill set and the right people in the right position, because there is a lot of things that we are building. There is a lot of, like places where we are missing, like even redundancy on some skills, because like teams are built the way they are built over time. And sometimes it's good to assess somehow like what is missing. So I would say that I'm focusing a lot of my time on I would say more administrative type of work right now, because the organization itself requires that part. But on the tech side, it's like hiring the right leaders, making sure that we have we had the chance to hire like a bunch of people like recently, and this is helping us like to go and build the roster that we need to go and tackle down like all the priorities that we have for the end of the year and next year. So it's like working on that the most. After I have tons of discussion on technology and with vendors and things like that for more like strategic side of the house, and like for us to define a bit more like how do we partner and how do we work like with these people. So like it's very high level at that point right now. Like it's less hands-on for sure compared to the OCTO where like we were doing things that are more in the details. But I'm staying close to the technicals because I love it and because I'm deeply passionate by that. But yeah, right now the focus is going to be continuing to consolidate and grow the organization, empower our folks. And I take lots of pride looking at the organization this way, because I like to work with people. So
yeah,
it's a very stable moment for me.
Very cool. Yeah, I've definitely found that I like building organizations almost as much as I like building networks.
Yeah,
maybe more. Depends on the day, I think.
Sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but like it resonates so much what you just said, because like I believe that like if you go from definition to execution, like that's the joy of being a leader, is to be able to see like steps coming one after the other, like and people be able to be able to execute. So somehow, like when you're passionate, and I know you are passionate about the technologies like me, like it's super good to see like things that you sometimes would like to see and that you like to work on, like if you were the engineer, like coming to life. And that's for me it's a form of art. I'm like I really enjoy that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Nico, do you have any projects or causes that you'd like to highlight for the Imposter Syndrome Network?
So what is important for me at the end is like mentoring people. Like I think that there is a bunch of very, very talented folks out there, and like mentoring is just like a few hours of your time, like here and there to help someone else grow. I think that there is a lot of things, including the APC, that for the veterans and an organization like that. I like encourage people to be active in that, because like giving of our knowledge, I think it's very important. That's the people that might build also like things tomorrow. So I think that this is one of the things that I find very interesting. And also like there is like within companies, sometimes giving a hand on the helping people, like on giving directions, even if it's not in your group, like it's always good to have like discussion and opening the door to people that may have questions. So that's what I'm advocating for, like to be like taking the time to listen to your folks, and sometimes like answering a few questions can help unlocking like a situation. So that's important to me. And yeah, that's the not a project, but that's something else that we should do like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love it. Nico, thank you so much for sharing your story with the Imposter Syndrome Network. And thank you to all of our listeners for your attention and your support. If you found this episode insightful or interesting, please consider paying it forward by letting others know about this show and the great guests we have on. Before we do kind of turn the mics off, Nico, I am curious, what do you think of as the greatest achievement in your career so far?
The greatest achievement in my career so far, I would say, let me think. Like, I think that the period at Twitch was like one of the super exciting moments of my career, because when I joined, we are not acquired by Amazon yet. It was, or we just got acquired. It was really much at the limit. And when I joined, it was kind of like a new era that was going to start at Twitch, because we were going full speed into like deploying a lot of locations, building the network. And I think that it's not my achievement, it's our achievement with the team. It was like a team effort that was like we were like learning as we were building, and it was fantastic. And like I miss a lot that period of my career, like, and all the team there at Twitch. So hi guys. So yes, that's a great achievement, is to see like things coming up online and then people enjoying the service. Simple as that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for like again like inviting me today, and thank you, Zoe, also as well. Like, I appreciate your questions.
Well, we'll be back next week.
Chris, you look concerned.
Am I? Sorry. I'm not.
You're like...
Possible just jet lag on my face. I don't know.
Have you been traveling? Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's been a couple of days now, but I was in Tokyo, which is, literally night and day. So I was there for 7 days, and I got back on Monday. I'm feeling pretty good today, but that's my excuse for everything this week.